So if you have been an Assassin's Creed fan for long enough, you have probably seen how different people have different characters in their top 3. Now, the one caveat to this is that yes, Ezio for 90% of people watching is going to be at number 1. But apart from Ezio, you kind of see people falling into having their favorite characters resemble the other favorite characters that they have. There are very broadly a few archetypes that an Assassin's Creed character can fall into. For example, you can have the charismatic, confident guy like Ezio, Arno, or Edward that kind of don't take life too seriously, and then because of a series of traumatic events, they become much more serious and much more dedicated to the philosophy of the creed and keep their charisma for the most part, but show a little bit more of focus and adopt a bit more of a serious tone, but at the end of the day are pretty lighthearted, pretty charismatic, and like to joke quite a bit. Then you have the complete jokers who just go around life with no emotional depth whatsoever, but can be charismatic in the eyes of some people and are very lighthearted, which a lot of people like. These are people like Alexios, Cassandra, Jacob, and Evie Fry, and that's kind of like one subset of characters. And then the third archetype is the archetype that I want to talk about, which is the brooding, edgelord, serious guy who takes himself too seriously and is a complete badass. And that's the archetype that is for me my favorite and kind of like summates my top 3 favorite characters, which are Altair, Basim, and Bayek. Now, when you look at these 3 characters, they have a lot in common. And instead of going one by one explaining why I like them, I kind of want to just explain what I'm a sucker for, what my soft spot is, just like a lot of people might have a soft spot for the character of Connor and Eivor, which I think fans of Eivor tend to be fans of Connor as well, fans of Ezio tend to be fans of Edward, and fans of Altair and Bayek tend to be fans of Basim. So why is it that I am in this last group? Why is it that I'm a sucker for those way more than any other characters? And by the way, this isn't to say that I don't love these characters. I love Arno, I love Edward, of course I love Ezio, and I do find myself resonating and relating to a lot of these other character archetypes throughout the series. However, I have a complete bias towards this darker, brooding sort of character. And the reason why is because what I look for in an AC protagonist is an assassin first and a protagonist or person second. That's not to say that it's not important to have character development or to have a fleshed out story behind the person under that hood, but I think that when I'm first playing a game, I want to make sure that I can embody what I would consider an ideal assassin to be. And just so you understand it perfectly, if you think back to the Assassin's Creed 1 trailer, which I think is one of the best video game trailers of all time, that minute and a half or however long it is presents the tone, the style, the skill, and the type of assassin that I deem to be the perfect Brotherhood assassin. And you kind of begin to see the picture that I'm trying to paint. Altair, Bayek, and Basim are all very focused on performing the task as efficiently as possible and only care about furthering their mission, or rather completing their mission. They use parkour, stealth, and combat as effectively and minimalistically as possible. They don't go around taunting enemies or making jokes or making quips. They don't go around being flashy with their parkour, and they don't spend more time in combat than they should. They make sure that every mission is performed as efficiently as possible, and they have this philosophy that staying true to the tenets of the creed is the only way to be an assassin, or the best way to be an assassin. I find this type of character so enthralling to be like, because I don't find myself, at least in some sense, similar to them. Because at an intellectual level, I relate to them a lot. I like how much they spend time thinking and analyzing situations. I like how they all consider the points of view of their enemies and their targets and question the dogma and the belief and the creed that they form a part of. I find myself in life questioning a lot of things, questioning my beliefs, and finding a lot of value in questioning these things. However, when it comes to being serious and not liking to have fun, I don't really relate to that, but I love that in an Assassin's Creed character, because when I'm playing these games, I'm looking to escape in these games. I'm looking to live out a fantasy of a human that is on the verge of being superhuman, on a human that is so disciplined, so skilled, so athletic, so talented at killing, that you can then express yourself perfectly once you're told this is the fantasy that you should want to create, and once you convince yourself that this is the fantasy that I want to create. Which is why I find Assassin's Creed so unique in the first place. I know there's a lot of stealth games that are probably better than Assassin's Creed. I know there's a lot of historical fantasy games that are probably better than AC, but none of them quite serve this fantasy of a silent, stealthy assassin with a hidden blade and a hood and these white robes, this beautiful suspension of disbelief where you could actually believe this is a master of stealth that can blend into a crowd, that can do all the assassin things, that can jump through rooftops and be this absolute hero. And to have that hero be so stern, so serious, and so dedicated to the craft is a perfect environment in which I can escape and form my own narratives perfectly. I find it probably the coolest, which again, I think that a lot of Assassin's Creed is just style points and cool points. I think that the aesthetics that they have in their outfits, the simplicity of their outfits kind of resonates with the simplicity of their approach to stealth and combat. And I find that I appreciate them at a physical level, at an intellectual level, and at a philosophical level. At a physical level, as I've already talked about before, I love how they go about completing missions. I think it's a very original, I think it's a very minimalist, efficient way to do it, which is something that I really like in my own gameplay and when I imagine these people doing what they do when I read books or watch cutscenes. I appreciate them at an intellectual level because I like how they plan, and I like their thoughts behind planning these missions, especially Altair, when you see the notes that he has on how he's going to attack a target or the ideas that he has on how to infiltrate a place. Same with Basim and Bayek, the ideas that float throughout their heads in terms of how to overcome adversity, I think are very intelligent, very creative, and again, the word efficiency. These people represent the pinnacle of a Brotherhood assassin in terms of skill and technique, in my opinion at least. And of course, I'm not saying that other characters aren't incredibly skilled. I think Ezio, for example, is one of the most skilled characters in the franchise, but there is something to that intellect and that pre-planning phase and that kind of going through the motions of this pre-planned routine that I really like from these characters. And then philosophically, something that I touched on earlier but didn't really go in depth on is how much they question things. Questioning things, I think, is one of the most important things that someone should do in their lives, and I like when video games make you think about how you should live your own life, because obviously we're not running around killing a million guards, we're not jumping through rooftops, but we still relate a lot and learn a lot from the teachings of Assassin's Creed throughout the games, especially the well-written ones, and especially when we find that this character is going through something at least emotionally similar to what we're going. What I found from my own life is that questioning one's own beliefs, especially when one has been raised in an environment where questioning your beliefs was a form of treason or heresy, being able to grow out of that shell and listen to your enemies and see what your enemies are saying that you can agree on, listening to criticism and to see if any of that criticism holds any truth, and then questioning the beliefs that you do agree with to make sure that you know if you agree with them, and very importantly, why you agree with them. This is something that I admire so much in the characters that I play as, which is why I find myself always going to these characters, and why I think that I'm a sucker for these archetypes as opposed to Ezio and Edward, which tend to not question themselves tend to not question themselves until the end of the game, and even then tend to be pretty lighthearted about it or very Hollywood-esque about it. There's no gritty reality to the realizations that these people make, and if they are, it's very cinematic, it's very Hollywood, and even though I love it and I think it's extremely well written, it's not exactly for me. At least not enough to put them at the top of my list. I think Edward and Ezio would probably be number 4 and number 5, so I still think that they're some of the best characters in the franchise. But Bayek, Basim, and Altair are the kind of stern, serious, dark assassin brotherhood that I would idealize. If I was to say who's the ideal assassin, what is an ideal assassin, what do they represent, what are they like? When you think assassin, what do you think of? You don't think of charisma, really. You don't think of wit or charm or quips or combat or flashy moves. Some of you might, but I don't. I think of an efficient, calculated, cold killer who thinks more than he does. And I think that that's something that I really like having understood about myself, why I find myself drawn to these characters. So if you're listening to this video and you disagree with me, I think that's great. Find what your archetype of Assassin's Creed character is, who you prefer to play as and who you relate most to and try and figure out why that is. Try and figure out something about the aspects of your own personality, of your own worldview, and try and understand why you relate to these characters more than others. And I think I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts, because I think it's a very interesting thing. And tell me if you disagree in the way I've categorized these characters and their archetypes. Maybe you think that I'm missing something, but it's very interesting to think about not only who you like, because I know it's very fun to just sit around and be like, what's your favorite game? What's your favorite character? What's your favorite mission? But when it comes to characters at least, but perhaps games as well, ask yourself why this is your favorite character, outside of the quality of the writing, outside of the quality of the dialogue or the voice acting, which of course are all confounding variables. Ask yourself why that archetype of character, that type of person behind the hood attracts you so much. And maybe you'll realize that, like me, if a person has the type of characteristic that fits that hood, you're likely to like them a little bit more. Thank you for watching this video, and if you're interested in watching another video, you can watch the one that's on the screen right now.